You're listening to The Big Cast, your source for the latest in financial technology. Brought to you weekly by the Best Innovation Group, with your hosts, John Best and Glen Sarvati.
Before we jump into this week's conversation with John Best, just want to give a couple of quick updates because news travels so fast these days. A few developments since we recorded last week. You probably saw over the long holiday weekend Pope Leo's encyclical that sets a cautionary tone around artificial intelligence. He is strongly encouraging safeguarding mankind and working for the common good rather than profit. That kind of brought to mind for me the recent court case between pitting OpenAI against one of their early investors and founders, Elon Musk, which didn't really solve much except for just decide the statute of limitations was up. So kind of interesting to see exactly what comes out of that. But the whole notion of what Pope Leo was saying kind of really ties into the conversation that John and I were having, and maybe something about the vibe that's out there in the world right now. Another unrelated item that this is the way my brain works, just drawing connections. You may have seen this news over the weekend as well. Carlo Petrini, the founder of the slow food movement, which was a response to fast food in Italy back in the late 1980s and has since really grown into a global phenomenon. He passed away over the weekend. The whole notion of the slow food movement reminded me that perhaps we're on the precipice of something you might call the slow tech movement. Again, remember, slow food movement goes back to the late 1980s, and I don't think there's that much less fast food, so it's not exactly had a massive impact in terms of changing things, but who knows? We may be even further down the fast food lane if that weren't the case. But again, vibe check, for lack of a better thing to say. And then finally, you'll hear toward the end of the episode, John mentioning that he was been working and considering the new features that and capabilities rolled out by ChatGPT around personal finance. And since then, we've recorded the most recent town hall session, which really held court on exactly that topic. We'll post a link if you want to find out more about what that all looks like. You can find that at the most recent version of the CU Town Hall. With no further ado, buckle up, because this one gets, John was in fine form this week. More on a conversation on AI.
Hello, everyone. It's my triumphant return to the Big Cast. If you haven't heard my voice for a while, it's because Glenn has been keeping me hostage in the trunk of his 1978, I think it was Plymouth Valari.
Before they had the little latch that you could get out yourself. Sorry.
Yeah, so I could figure out how to get out of it. But I'm back, and I'm here, and I'm excited to be with Glen Sarvati. This is the Big Cast. My name is John Best. I'm the CEO and head chief bottle washer for Best Innovation Group.
I think the phrase is Grand Poobah. I've given
Grand Poobah. We were just talking about that. That's a Flintstone phrase. We were actually talking about Mr. Slate is who we were talking about earlier. Remember him? He's the guy that runs the quarry where where Barney and Fred worked. But anyways, I digress. So we're here to talk about a few things via AI today, and there's this great message. But Glenn, let me introduce Glen Sarvati for those of you that don't know him who've never listened to this before. Glen is a very powerful AI I created in my garage. He knows everything about payments. It's really smart. About 10 years ago, I made him. I didn't want to release it to the open world, but here we are now.
And then I went rogue and bought a 1978 Valari and the rest.
And Plymouth Valari, and out he went. We didn't see him anymore. No, Glenn, how are you?
I'm good. We've been seeing more of each other lately. I think twice in the last month and a half.
CU Unplugged, and we just saw each other at the Innovation Club, which was fantastic out in Moline, and we got to sit in a tractor together, which was exciting. We haven't done that in a while, or a combine or whatever that thing was. It was incredibly big. But while we were there, I think something you want to. Why don't you paste it in here? Because I know.
Yeah, let me.
Give it to me.
Yeah, I was just thinking that the last two times we've been together, AI, not surprisingly, I guess, has been front and center. When we did the unconference format at CU Unplugged, that was the predominant topic, and people had thought enough about AI that they'd carved it up into probably 6, 7, 8 kind of subtopics, and we held court on each of those. But while we were out in Moline at the Innovation Club, Roger Grimes posted something, which I mistaken. I want to apologize. I traded notes with Roger, and he clarified. These are not Roger's thoughts. He forwarded a post that had been sent to a Reddit thread sometime back. It's a few months old at this point, but he wanted to kind of get more conversation on it. And there's been a robust thread around this, conversations going on both on LinkedIn and on Reddit. And I'll post the link to that again. And Roger even said, I agree with some of this. I don't agree with all of it. And it basically, the title of the post was, I was once an AI true believer. Now I think the whole thing is rotting from the inside. And my first reaction was, I got to show this to John. And we talked about maybe having Roger on, and unfortunately he was traveling all this week, and we wanted to kind of get to the topic, but we already kind of did a bit of a rebuttal on this at the Innovation Club, JB. So
yeah, we did, and you thought it'd be a good idea in the podcast. I think so. Do you want to read this real fast, or you want me to read it?
I won't go through the whole thing, but let me kind of go through some highlights that here we go. The very beginning part. I used to be all in on large language model built automations, client tools, business workflows, hell, entire processing around GPT and similar systems. I thought we were seeing the dawn of a new era. I was wrong. And I'm not, the name of the person is not clear from the way this is posted. It's just
it's somebody from Reddit. It's complete C6655. That's their Reddit.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know Mr. C6655. So but the other thing, he continues and says, if your workflow needs any real accuracy, consistency, or reproducibility, these models are a liability, which we've known for some time. And I think maybe that's one of the places to jump in. The other thing he says is the time and money that go into the guardrailing of this, creating safety layers and compliance, dwarfs the cost of actually paying a human to do the work in the first place correctly. So maybe those were two of the really key points. And I know one of the things that we've talked a lot about are the need for AI guardrails. And there is that whole issue that you can ask the same question, multiple times and get multiple different answers. So,
but that's where we'll start that's where we need to start our rebuttal here. Is there's a difference between different answers and the same answers, but formatted different. Or the same answers but not complete, and that's something that wasn't sufficiently, I think, covered in that thing. So we talked about the idea of it being deterministic versus probabilistic, and for those of you that don't know, it's big words, whatever, but it's Boolean, right? It's hey, this is true or false, or here's your answer. And it's, it always comes back the same way every time. That's very much a computer way of doing things. And it's easy because then we know where the answer is. We know how to grab it. But AI might give you the answer in a table one way or a chart. And then the next time might give you, if you don't tell it specifically, might decide the best way to show that to you is in an inline paragraph with text or in some other mode. And while you're getting the same information, much like a human, if I asked you, Glenn, hey, what are the, what do you think about Jerome Powell, blah, 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 whatever the latest is on the Fed, I might get it. And I asked you the same question 20 minutes later, I think I would get the gist of the same answer, but I certainly wouldn't get verbatim the same words that you used to answer it previously.
Well, my thought is, and I agree with what you're saying, but I think it goes even a step further, is if you're looking for a concrete, the phrase you used before, a deterministic answer, can you really determine that this is the incontrovertible fact? This is probably not the device for you. If you're looking for something that creates nuance, that is dealing with probabilities, that gives you a best path forward or a recommendation, I think there's a lot of value there, but I think it's a matter of what use case you want to apply to it as well.
Well, you just pointed out, sometimes the variability is not the bug. Sometimes that's the value proposition, right? So if I ask 10 people the same strategic question, I'll get 10 answers. The question is knowing whether the variability is acceptable and when the determinism is required.
Well, same basic logic. Every CEO's got a whole C-suite of people. He's probably asking multiple folks, and if you don't have, if you don't want to fall, prey to groupthink, hopefully you're going to get some different opinions before you make a decision. Now, Again, we get back to that point that I always make that I used to hear back when you still had the little spokes on the side of the paper, the green and white barred computer paper, and people would say, "Oh, it's printed on computer paper; it must be right." Well, no, not if the program was wrong. So taking anything at face value without some level of audit is certainly a risk. So there's no reason to believe that, we've suddenly created, the perfect omniscient machine. And we've talked about AGI, actual, artificial general intelligence, which we know we haven't gotten to. And even that probably doesn't hit that threshold.
Well, and I thought, one of the strongest criticism in the post was that small updates silently break chains of logic. And, prompt fragility is definitely true, right? And model drift is true. That's why serious AI deployments are moving towards, model pinning, meaning that, you're going to use the same exact model in the same spot every time. Synthetic testing, being able to do agent observability to be able to see what it did. So, I think that I actually think this is a fair criticism. But again, it's an engineering problem. If if I know that that's the case, then I have to produce my apps to be intelligent enough to be backwards compatible for the updates, and to be forwards compatible with regards to if something changes. I had a plan for that, or I at least had it abstracted enough that it can be fixed fairly easily and understood. And one of the superpowers that I think people are missing about AI is not so much its ability to give you code or create pictures or whatever, but really the ability to document, describe, thoroughly research procedures and processes, including code that was often not done because of, there's so many people, so much code out in the world that it's not fully documented because they simply didn't have the time. But I wouldn't disagree that this fragility is true, and that but I also still think it's an engineering problem that people are overcoming with better harnesses and better better prompts and better basically model suites or model software that runs the model.
I thought it was really refreshing because frankly, when I pointed this out to you, I just expected you to kind of blow a gasket and say, "This guy's nuts. This is crazy." And you went, "No, there's actually some truth to what he's saying, but it's yes and
Right.
yes, there's fact in it, and yes, there's a counter way of looking at it that still allows for these issues without basically, for lack of a better expression, throwing the baby out with the bathwater."
Yeah. And that brings us to its next issue, which is you can't version lock intelligence, but you're kind of getting to where you can. So, one thing, I did this test at my last speaking gig, and it went really well. But Glenn, do you have ChatGPT or something on your phone?
Not at the moment, no.
Okay. But if you went in there, and I have it right here, I'm going to ask Claude, this is the latest Claude, Opus 4.7. What is your knowledge cut off date? So I just asked the absolute latest Claude what it's in. The latest Claude shows me that its knowledge cutoff date is the end of January 2026. For anything that may have changed since then, I can web search to get current information. If you were to ask ChatGPT the same thing, I just did it with June 2024.
24?
Is what ChatGPT just said. Now that's an older model. I have the model set to auto. But if I set the model to the latest, so I'm going to go in and tell it I want whatever the ChatGPT 5, and I'll do a new one where I'm connected to that, and I ask it, is your knowledge cutoff date? And so I say all that August 2024. So I say all that to say this, that there certainly is.
These are the paid versions. These are not even the. Does the date get a little bit closer if you're working on a professional version?
Yeah, that's that one. So the one that's January 2026 is a pro version of Claude.
Okay.
But I will tell you that the version that I just did is also the pro version of ChatGPT. So take it for what it's worth.
I'm shocked that it's back to 24. I remember the number in 25, but wow.
Right. And by the way, I have done the same model more than once and sometimes gotten different numbers to his point. So, that drift is real. But if that's just one more thing that you have to go, okay, I have to understand that, and I have to make it part of my process to understand what is going on and, where everything stands, and then take that into account. And so, for example, if I'm working on a particular software library or something, and I want to make sure that that software library is, when we do the coding, that we use the latest version, and that we, follow the latest rules around the implementation of that library, I will almost always have it built into my plan and my prompts to go out and take any of the software that we're using and make sure that we have the latest generation and the latest documentation. I'll go a step further and I will create a repo where I will store all that information. And again, this is the consumer grade versus the other stuff, but it's still, kind of a thing. So it's like building a bank core on a beta site, that being shocked when the beta is not the final, it's not.
I like your point about storing the information. I mean, that to me, that's one of the ways to create the audit trail. And again, it gets back to use case, because there are plenty of things you can research and, apply knowledge from mid 2024 and you're just fine. There are other things where there have been some pretty significant developments in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Thinking, healthcare. Healthcare may be one that you want to make sure that you would take into account the latest and greatest. Which is one of the points, again, that I thought it was interesting. What do you think about that notion? Well, the first thing that comes to my mind too is this is just a further confirmation of the human in the loop, the absolute necessity. This is not going to automate everyone out of the process. At a minimum, you need a babysitter.
Yeah. So you're talking about the guardrails, right? Okay, so this is from a company called Figure One, I believe. And they have had this running now for 118 hours. This is an actual live running robot. He has been they switch him out, so this guy will run out of power eventually. But his job is to turn these packages over, and he is making sure that the labels go down so that when it flows over the sensor, it gets scanned. And as you can see, he's done 151,000 packages in 121 hours. Now, earlier this weekend, yesterday, they had him go up against a human for 8 hours, and they came out about the same. Only because the human's much faster, but only because the human had to take potty breaks and had to take lunch and other things, which they displayed by putting, screenshots and stuff up there about that. But you could see, if this isn't continuous running with no guardrails, I don't know what is. And so, but this is a very particular task. And I say that to make the point that, what you're saying there, and I'll put this link in there because I don't know if it'll still be running by the time this podcast goes out, but it's the best, most amazing.
That was actually a live stream. That wasn't even a video. That was
still. That's a live stream. Yes. So it should still be going for some time. But my point in to what he says is, yes, I agree that the safety layers in some cases can cost more than humans, especially for like low volume or highly specialized workflows. And that's not what it's for. At scale, when we look at support operations, coding accelerating, document analysis, fraud review, anything that requires synthesis of data, including summarization, or workflow orchestration, which is a real powerful use case of synthesis of data. It's genuine. The guardrails are there and they're working as we speak, or the medical community wouldn't be using it, and the others. So,
which is just another example to me of the use case situation again. And
right,
if like you say, it's interesting, and it probably won't continue to be this way. But you said, the human actually was a little bit better if you didn't take into account bio breaks and lunches and things like that. That probably won't continue to be the case. The robot's going to get better.
Right.
But we're back to that other point, though. Oh my gosh, a human's going to be replaced. I don't see a whole lot of people going, oh my God, I really, really get my life's work, my fulfillment from sitting there and flipping those packages all day. So it's not as if it's taking away a job that creates fulfillment. Speak for myself.
Speak for yourself. Yeah, I love that job. And I'm sad that the robot's taking it from me. I've always aspired to flip packages, especially ones that are on a loop and it's meaningless.
You gotta look at it from the robot's point of view too, though. I mean, robots getting some fulfillment as well, I'm sure.
Right. So, the safeguards rarely function. That's because most guardrails that are built in today are for systems that were optimized for deterministic stuff, not, controlled execution. And especially because the current AIs are all general reasoning, but we're headed towards, models that are for execution, for controlled execution. And I think that's going to play out as well. And so, when I lay this all out, what I think, like I said, there are some things in here that I feel are true, but I guess my summation is this: it's still the sum of its parts, and its capability is still greater than the issues it has at the moment. It crossed that line, I think, a couple of years ago. And
Like everything else, you can't just think about it as a binary all or nothing.
right.
Neither of the extremes are correct. There's a
But
middle ground somewhere.
I also want to point out one other thing. So I had my buddy Comet go out and find this original Reddit post, which I will share with you. It was, I have the link for the post now, but I am seeing more and more of this, and what it shows to me is what I've known all along, which is AI is not there to replace your critical thinking, and it's not there to turn you into the brain surgeon that you never were. You know, the AI's purpose is to assist you with your job, and you don't want to be having it do things that you can't prove out to know whether it was right or not. You shouldn't be using it for that. If you can't at least have some expertise of domain in it, then you shouldn't have AI attempting it for you. And the area I see this most in is coding. People just think, hey, coders are dead. No, we're going to have trouble, because what it is that AI takes someone who is kind of an across the board engineer. And I would say that, I kind of fall into that category, and, turns them into a superpower, because if you understand deployment and you understand where everything is in the platform, then that's all you've been waiting for as a team. Doesn't mean it'll be perfect, but you certainly will be very productive with it. I think when you're trying to build out these things and use their tools, and use the stuff that I feel like they're trying to create for the consumer grade coder, that's a long ways towards being complete, in my opinion.
What I'm hearing again is my favorite word for the financial services industry, which is trust. And I think that, to your point, that all makes good sense to me. And I don't know if you want to blame it on media hysteria, or, just, the never ending suspicion of, nefarious motivations. But, yes, all of that is true. But I think there's probably a lot of people still going, yeah, but that's never stopped folks before from trying to, use it in a way that it wasn't really intended, whether they understand that or not. So yes, we're back to that view of, yes, in a perfect world, yes, this should work out great. There's going to be some bad apples everywhere, and I'm not sure how much you can do about that. But
Well,
hopefully a well-run company will understand that and not try to cut too far to the bone, or
I think,
take the approach of cutting too far and then we're finding out what breaks later and adding back.
yeah, and I think there's one other thing that we haven't been discussing. It appears, based on this, that the author of this, this was 10 days ago that he posted it, by the way, and the author doesn't really have anything that you could see, no comments, no posts, like everything's hidden. But the one thing I would say is that it does not make mention of local versus cloud models, and local models are evolving. They are getting better, and so you've got this weird kind of chart forming where you have CPUs getting faster, right? And when I say CPUs, I really mean like GPUs, like Apple's M5 technology, or the GPUs. You have all of those getting a whole lot faster, and the consumer grades ones coming down in price. And then you've got the models, which are getting smarter, more efficient, and more effective. And there is going to be a inflection point between the two of them. And when that happens, it's going to be a lot like when Microsoft CE came out. Remember Microsoft CE? It was on little chips that went into everything. Like you'd see CE everywhere.
It
You see
took me a
Microsoft.
second to remember what you were talking about, but yes,
Yeah,
I do remember
but
that.
basically that was a version of Microsoft's operating system, like Android, that could be deployed to like a dryer or an appliance or anything that needed sort of a little operating system and something to run the events in the system or have a computer. And we're going to see that same thing from models. They're going to be execution models that will eventually be running locally on these devices. And when that happens, that will give this gentleman or person them the finite and granular control that they're hoping to get. And the challenge is, the trade-off is that the pros are always going to be so much better because they're running on data centers that take up whole cities and eat all their water and power, as opposed to your little system that you bought, or the system you bought from Apple or whatever. The good news is that the difference of the two is going to continue to get closer and closer. That delta will be closer and closer, but it's never going to get to the grade of it. It's like anything else, you can buy. It's all going to be a factor of what you spend and what you're trying to build.
I think you're talking about something a little differently than this, but when you started talking about the large language models and the local models and things, what about the whole notion of very kind of industry specific models? Like I know, there's a new Cultivate AI is now currently building a new model just specifically for the credit union industry. And I see a future there, not only from an efficiency standpoint, but also that you can control kind of some of the wacky outcomes because you're not polling the entire internet. You can actually curate what goes into the set of knowledge that's being applied to these decisions. Is that separate and apart, or are those two kind of related?
I've never felt like knowledge cut off or the training data is getting in the way of the responses. I've always felt like it's a factor of prompting and engineering around drift. And I think that actually there's some new technology which we mentioned on the before of this call. So in the AI world, there's machine learning, and machine learning. The best example for a fine tech guy like you is our friend Falcon, the old ML neural networking that says, "Hey, this transaction that Glenn just did from Bulgaria at 2 a.m. seems like it's out of place, especially since earlier today he was at his local coffee shop that he loves. Hard to get to Bulgaria in 4 hours, right?" So, and it's not an online company. So the neural networking from Visa will find that and push through an issue. That is a very specific and deterministic use of AI that is building out a machine language model. So that's what people liked, is when they had those sorts of things, but they had very big limitations. They were very purpose driven. So what happens when you take a regular AI and give it access to MLs? And
And
it can
this
get
was
its outcomes from that.
that phrase neuro-symbolic AI that I just heard from our
Yes.
buddy Lee Wetherington last week.
Yes, neuro-symbolic AI. That's the future, right? Like, it's funny because my favorite thing to do whenever I'm speaking on this subject, and I've just been getting lots of opportunities to do it lately, is to ask people, "Hey, what do you use AI for?" So I want to put that to our audience. What are you guys using it for? Because man, I would love to collect up those use cases. And by the way, I don't care if it's personal or work, because, like, for example, I found a tribe of people who all were doing the same thing with AI, but not connected to each other. So they didn't know. I think that's the next level, is they were all raising chickens, and they were using AI to help them raising chickens, but none of them had talked to each other. So each of them was using different aspects of the AI to solve problems in the chicken coop thing. But none of them. But once they all realized they were all talking about, because they were all in one room together, I saw them congregating over there. I called them the Chicken Coop Club. But
Decentralized AI. Is it
exactly, that's what it's going to come down to. So if you're interested, drop us a line. Tell us like a cool use case. Somebody told me they were taking a picture of their fridge and just saying, "This is what I have. Help me make dinner." In their pantry. Amazing stuff.
Yeah, it's
Just
back to
amazing
that
stuff.
story too, where some people say, "Yeah, and I'm not allowed to use it at work." Well, that's guardrails. Yes, don't use it for the wrong things, but yeah, it'd be awfully nice. I love your idea of the scorecard. getting the gamification, get people to, show that they're
Yeah,
actually learning
the
about
leaderboard,
tools. The
the
leaderboard. Right.
leaderboard. But all in all, I know that I feel like we are, some people would say that, this post is evidence of the trough of disillusionment or whatever in the Gartner hype cycle. And so far, I just have not seen it. Every time I think I'm done and like it can't surprise me, it does. And I don't know what to tell you about.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, this might be a precursor that, that it could be on the horizon. And that's not a bad thing if you have to work through that too. But this, maybe it's easier said than done. But I mean, one guardrail that would seem to make sense would be if a question comes up that is clearly time sensitive. I mean, couldn't you build something into the AI that would
oh, they absolutely have.
would tell
They
you
have,
as of date X, nope, Chuck's alive and kicking.
right. But remember, it has a context window and it only knows. Like, one of the really interesting things you can do if you want to have some fun, and this is one of the very first tests I did, was I told the AI, hey, I'm going away for a while, time me. And I let it sit, and it came back about 5 minutes later. I set a little timer. I came back and said, how long was I gone for? And initially it had no idea. It said 3 days, or it thought it was still night, or you were never gone. It just had no clue. Newer models seem to have some sense of time. But what I built into my models was every time you interact with me, you timestamp it, and you know when that day is and what we talked about, and that you get the time, fresh time every time we talk, so that you have some idea, because time is so context important, right?
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. Now that ever since I did that at around 12 a.m., Claude will start telling me I need to go get some sleep, whether I like it or not. It just keeps fighting me, like, now go to bed. Like, let's save this for tomorrow. Go to bed. Let's save this for tomorrow. Go to bed. I'm like, look, Claude, I don't need my mom here to send me to bed. I'll go to bed when I want to. Stop telling me that. But that's a great example of sort of empathy. Even if it's not real empathy, it's still empathy. I mean, there's so much going on here. I can't even, there's another great video that I showed from Anthropic about the underlying thinking. We watched that together.
Yeah.
We should post that one. So anyways,
send
yeah.
that link to, I mean, I'm still coming back to, it's not sentience at that point, but it's just, couldn't you build into the model? This was the last date you received, an information refresh. So
Well,
if
they have built that
asking you a
in.
question.
Yeah, they absolutely have. What they've built in now is they've built in so that it's supposed to, in the situations where it knows something is time sensitive, it should go out and check. The challenge is, back to that guy's thing, it's not rock solid. It doesn't always go check, no matter how many times you put it in the prompt. We are definitely still on the frontier here. We're in the pioneer, we're still out in the plains, dude.
Or my favorite metaphor, the early innings.
Or the Napster phase,
that's
is
right.
what I like to say.
But
But
Sean Fanning to come in. Okay.
Right. So I think that's certainly something to consider. But like I said, with regards to this post, first, glad Roger didn't actually write that. I was a little worried about him. That seems very angry for Roger. He's not an angry person. I've never known him to be. But at the same time, I know why he posted it, because I think what Roger's really good at is assimilating sort of the vibe, if you will, of the country with regards to these things when it's security and things like that. He's made a living off that, being very good at it. So
I think it also
his
speaks
there.
to the fact that he curates, his followers are more thoughtful, because I found that when I looked at his post and then the comments beneath it, it was a much more constructive and well-considered, dialogue thread that I'm used to seeing in these kinds of situations.
Yeah.
You definitely got a difference of opinion, but they weren't just totally screaming at each other and going nuts.
But no, I love to talk about this stuff. Been doing a ton of it. We had some, we should probably also in some future podcasts talk about ChatGPT's new finance feature.
Yes.
Which I set it up entirely this weekend, and I can talk about it. So we'll go through that.
And Claude's got a new small business component, and there's all kinds of good stuff there. We'll write some of this up in a blog post as well, and post a link to that as well. All right,
bro. Well, hey, where can people find you?
I think LinkedIn's probably the place I've been pointing people to recently. Glen Sarvati, 154 Advisors, but you can always check out big-fintech.com and leave us a note there as well. What about you?
This. You can find me here at my house in Florida, and also on the web at Big Fintech and LinkedIn. That's just John Best or JB Fintech, I think. Reach out, because just been doing a lot with this lately, and I'm very fascinated as to where the cranes are.
Until next time, good talking to you, John. And thanks to everybody for listening.
Cheers.
Check back each week for the latest from the Big Cast. Or better yet, we hope you'll consider subscribing for free via Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at Big Fintech, email info@big-fintech.com, or visit us at big-fintech.com and click on the Media tab, where you can post a comment or check out our archive of hundreds of past episodes. See you next week.